Welcome to our new Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program's digital education podcast. This is our new video podcast series called Cornell Marine Program's Digital Learning Podcast. This is our 8th show, and this week we're focusing on aquaculture and specifically on oysters. I like this topic this week because this week we're focusing on something I can eat.
Hey, Roy, I know you are a fan of seafood, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I'm on a seafood diet. I see food and I eat it.
Oh, okay.
No,
that's
seriously. I love oysters, and I love them so much I became a SPAT member, and I raised my own oysters basically for my family, and just to learn how to do it, and to it's like growing a garden, you know, it's like an oyster garden. Oh, and keeping with our kitchen traditions, Mark, I'm going to show you how to open up oysters.
That sounds good, Rory. I remember making some clam chowder on this show before.
Clam chowder.
There you go. Oh, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How many ways can you eat an oyster?
Well, let's start plain and simple. I like eating oysters on the half shell. Little lemon, maybe a little cocktail sauce.
So you're talking about raw oysters, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I love to slurp them down.
All right. Well, I've actually have slurped a few raw oysters myself.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I also like to prepare oysters in other ways.
Okay.
So I want to challenge you to a little contest today.
All right.
All right. What if I name an oyster recipe, and then right after it, you have to name another oyster recipe that's different than one that I had, and we'll see who gets stumped first.
All right. I like the challenge.
All right. Well, I'll start. I think I'll start with my favorite one, oysters Rockefeller.
I like that too. Oyster stew.
That's a New England tradition. All right. Fried oysters.
You can't forget bacon-wrapped smoked oysters.
Okay. This time of year, how about grilled oysters?
All right. I'll give you that one. So around Thanksgiving, though, we like to do oyster stuffing.
Yeah, I don't think we did oyster stuffing, but that's really a good one. All right. Well, as you may know, I grew up sort of near Buffalo area in Western New York.
Yep.
And obviously a lot of people heard about buffalo chicken wings, right?
Yeah.
All right. How about fried buffalo oysters?
I don't know. That doesn't sound so good, Mark. I don't know. I don't know if I could deal with I like the hot flavor, but maybe just some Franks on top of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
All right, then. Oyster bacon pot pie.
Oh, man, you're with that bacon again. I've heard of chicken pot pie. Okay, I give up, Rory. You win.
All right.
All right, congratulations.
All right.
All right, well, anyway, all this talk about oysters, you're making me hungry. And didn't you say you had some oysters in the kitchen you could open and shuck?
Yeah, I do have some oysters in the kitchen. But before we go out there, I want to show you guys a video, and it's called The Edible Oyster. It's a Cornell Marine moment. Oh, the edible oyster, a delicacy of historical magnitude. Hi, I'm Rory MacNish, and this is a Marine Minute Monday. Oysters have been a local food source for generations, from the Native Americans to today's Suffolk County restaurant patrons, eating a dozen on the half shell. Popular dishes include oysters Rockefeller, oysters stew, deep-fried oysters, smoked, grilled, and of course, raw oysters on the half shell. All tickle our taste buds. New York City Harbor at one time was the largest source of oysters harvested in the world. Today, oyster farmers are growing oysters in cages to market size and selling to fish markets and restaurants locally and in New York City. So stop by a local fish market and pick up some oysters, and as you slurp down that delicious delicacy, you are eating a bit of history. This has been a Marine Minute Monday produced by Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program.
Rory. Well, come here, Rory.
Hey, Mark. How's it going? Wait, let me turn the music down.
I can't hear you. What kind of music are you playing?
I'm playing Blue Oyster Cult, man. I'm stuck some oysters.
Oh, I get it.
I got some of my oysters from the SPAT program, and that I grew out. Okay,
those are nice looking.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They have a nice deep belly to them. You know, a deep cup, I should say. You know, so there's a lot of meat in there. But let me do a little bit smaller one here.
Oh, yeah, nice. Now, did you grow those?
I did. I'm a SPAT member, so I did grow these. And I love doing that because I grow my own food, basically. And it's like growing a garden. You know?
Yeah, that's great.
I got my garden out there, and I got my oyster garden up in Southold. So,
all right, let's see you open one of these days.
Okay, so first I'm going to put my glove on. Right.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, just kind of, it's a little, you want to be safe. And
safety first.
Safety first. And then I have this wooden holder, basically. I got this from the SPAT program. They made a bunch of these at one point.
So that holds the oyster steady while you're using the knife?
Exactly. That holds the oyster right in there, so you're not going to slip. You could do it by hand with the glove, and you can work it. And a lot of times people that do it faster, they know what they're doing and stuff. I mean, I know what I'm doing. It's just that I prefer in the kitchen to use this.
Okay, so that knife, before you stick it in the oyster, what kind of knife is that? Is that a clam knife?
It's an oyster knife.
Now, how's that different than a clam knife?
It's different because it has this little bow, like a little...
the bend at the end. Okay, I see that. Okay.
And what that does is that helps you go to the back, the hinge part of the oyster.
Okay.
So basically, what I do is I put it in the flat side up, and I put that into the holder, and then I work the knife into the hinge, and I put pressure in there, and I push down. And sometimes the shell is a little soft, but once you're inside, then you want to move to the abductor muscle and cut that. All right? And so once it's cut, you move it back out, and then it just flips open, and then you just cut whatever's left on the top and put that into your oyster. Now this one kind of broke a little bit, but once you're done with that, you take the knife and just kind of cut the bottom abductor part, and then you can flip it over for presentation, because that underbelly kind of makes it a little bit nicer.
Okay.
Then I made sure I made some of this.
Oh, nice.
Little cocktail sauce. Now, some people say, oh, you got to eat it straight up. But I love the combination of cocktail sauce and lemon. Oh my gosh, between the two of them, I don't know what it does. It's got that horseradishy, lemony, tomatoey sauce, Ready?
Yep, do it. Nice.
And heaven.
All right. Well, good. Well, thanks for sharing.
You're welcome. Now look, we've been talking about the oyster, and there's other ways that you can enhance our waterways with oysters. And
oyster is a great filter. And actually, they do use oyster reefs to actually improve water quality.
And that's right. And we have a guy that creates those reefs. But let me show you this spat-on shell before we go and talk to Gregg.
What is spat-on shell, and what purpose does recycled shell serve? Hi, I'm Rory MacNish, and this is a Marine Minute Monday. Oysters are often referred to as ecosystem engineers because they create vital habitat to many finfish and invertebrates in the marine environment. In order to become a reef, juvenile shellfish must first set onto existing shell material, forming large groups of individuals living attached to one another, forming a large reef. At our Southold facility, we use recycled shell as substrate for the juveniles to attach to in large tanks to create our spat-on shell oysters. The shell we collect from our recycling network partners is cured, tumbled, and conditioned. Once this process is complete, the shell is placed in our tanks and larval juvenile oysters are added. After a few days, the larval oysters attach securely, becoming spat. From there, they are moved to one of our restoration sites to form new reefs.
All right, so Mark, let's get our guest on. Hey, Gregg, what's going on, man?
How are you guys doing? It's all good here. I've been pretty busy despite all this pandemic stuff.
Yeah. It looks like you're kind of hanging in an unusual place. That looks like, I don't know, it looks like a boat maybe. Is that your?
Yeah, I'm on my yacht, my 28-foot yacht, built in 1979. So it's she's an old but goodie. She's called Odyssey.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm in the library. So I've been catching up on my reading. You know, I don't have a lot of time to read scientific literature, so I'm catching up on my reading.
Oh, no.
Nice.
Early oyster. I
I like that.
How Oysters Saved the Bay.
Cool.
These are great books, by the way. And I got a few more. The Oyster Secret is good too. So
Nice.
They look like adult reading.
The children's books, but that's about my speed.
All right.
Oh,
Cool.
okay. So you're in your floating office, huh, Greg?
That's right. I've got internet. Yeah, I got everything. You know, bathroom. It's all good.
How
Wow,
close
good
is
for
the
you.
galley? How close is the galley?
I would turn my computer around, but it's like, about 6 feet away.
There you go.
It's a
Nice.
small boat. It's a small boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Great.
I thought you said 128 feet.
No, just 28.
Well, it's great to have you with us this afternoon to talk about oysters and reefs, Greg, and thank you for your time. So can you give us a little example of like, well, why would you even create a new oyster reef, Greg?
So oyster reefs are really good at creating habitat. Everybody's talking about how oysters filter water, 50 gallons a day. And of course, that's a summertime oyster, a big oyster. In the winter, they're not filtering anything like that. So the main reason I like to create them is to create habitat. You could take a sandy bottom or even a muddy bottom, depending on how much shell you have, and you can create amazing habitat where fish will come. All kinds of colonizing organisms will come, everything from sponges to barnacles. We have video of fish spawning on our reef in Jamaica Bay, actually, in New York City.
Wow, isn't it true, Greg, that New York City used to have some of the largest oyster reefs in the world?
Yeah, I was going to tease you. I was going to have a chart on my boat like I was navigating the Hudson River, because the early navigators, including Henry Hudson, the namesake of that river, they ran aground on these oyster reefs at low tide because they would be intertidal. And they would be like a coral reef building on top of each other. And those are all gone, of course. But in the Chesapeake, there are still oyster bars like that. In New York, we're really creating really kind of two-dimensional reefs. I'm sorry. We're not really going very much more than maybe, 6 inches high. And in Jamaica Bay, it was less than half a meter high. So 1.5 feet maybe.
So in like Long Island, Peconic Bay, Long Island Sound, Great South Bay, oysters weren't really the major shellfish there, were they, like, say, in New York City Harbor?
No, in fact, there was quite a business in oyster farming going back to the 1800s in Brookhaven Town, Great South Bay, and in the Peconics, but they weren't naturally occurring oysters. They took seed back then. Remember, there were no hatcheries then.
Mm-hmm.
They took seed from everywhere from the Chesapeake, New York City, and Connecticut especially, because it's close, and brought them out to those bays and kind of fattened them up and grew them up larger. When you go to a raw bar now, most people are eating these little, small, 2-3 inch oysters, petites. Back then, that would be considered seed, and people would laugh if you sold them oysters that small.
Really, the market is they're really smaller now. Once they get to a certain point, they go to market then.
Yeah, Rory, that's correct. There's no minimum size in New York State for a cultured oyster.
Okay.
Growing it, if you're buying the seed, now remember, you got to buy the seed, not wild. You're not catching it wild. If you buy the seed, you can sell it any size you want. And if a farmer is getting, I'll make up a number, 50 cents an oyster for an animal that's about 2.5 inches in shell height, that's hinged to the bill. And if you wait another year till that oyster becomes 3 inches or more, and you're still going to get only 50 cents for it, well, wouldn't you sell it sooner? So a farmer wants to get rid of that crop as soon as possible. That's right. The answer. And okay. There's a demand in these cocktail bars for small oysters, yes.
Okay.
So if I'm raising oysters, Greg, and I have seed, how long does it take before I have a marketable oyster that I can sell?
Well, it depends how big the seed is when you get it, but generally it's 18 months to about 2 years.
Okay, that's good turnaround.
It sounds like you can make a fortune if you buy an oyster seed, one oyster maybe for a penny, and you sell it for 75 cents 2 years later. That's an amazing return on investment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that everything likes to eat oysters, not just humans. So you don't wind up with all the oysters you bought, and it's a lot of work. It's not like you're sitting around watching the grass grow. So oyster farming, you can make a living at it, but it's not an easy living. It's farming.
Yeah.
Right.
Greg, why an oyster reef, not a clam reef?
Clams like to burrow into the sand. That's how they live. It's called infauna, in the bottom. Oysters are epifaunal. They live on the top of the sand. If you bury them, they would die. Clams have little straws that come out, look like my fingers,
Yeah.
sticking out of the sediment like that to filter the water. Oysters just kind of gape their shell a little bit, I'm trying to get it right, and let the water go through their gills from one side to the other. So because of that, you can build a three-dimensional reef with these animals. You could not do that with clams.
Mhm.
Now, of course, clams do filter, not as much as oysters, but they don't really create that habitat because they're in the bottom. They are important for other reasons, which I won't go into on this Zoom, but oysters are really the way to go for creating habitat. People have called them ecosystem engineers. Of course, they don't have a degree in engineering, but as they grow, and if you have a self-perpetuating reef like in the Hudson back, 1600s, they're growing on top of each other, and they're making this three-dimensional matrix with all these little nooks and crannies where animals grow and hide from predators or go hunting for prey. And just so you know, there are permits required to do this. You can't just do this if you have waterfront property in your backyard. And people would like to do it, because if you go out, and I've been doing a lot of diving around Long Island for 30-something years, and like most of Peconic Bay, for instance, where I'm floating around near, is like a desert. It really is. Yeah, fish swim by, but the bottom is sand. Maybe a little bit of relic shell from the old oyster businesses out here. But you're talking about 15, 20 feet deep. Not a lot going on. No submerged aquatic vegetation because it's too deep, not enough light. Some seaweeds, yeah. But it's pretty devoid of permanent life. Yes, there's worms. Yes, there's crabs scurrying around. But when you put some shell down, even shell that has nothing in it, I say dead shell. All shell is dead, obviously.
Right.
But if you put shells down without any living oysters on it, you're going to get all kinds of things getting attracted within hours or days of that. And we've got videos. Wow. We're doing GoPro videos on a reef we did in Brookhaven last year as part of our permitting process. And we're seeing all kinds of cool stuff on this reef. And it's only in like knee-deep water at low tide. It's in Mauritius Bay. So we've created reefs from as far west as Jamaica Bay with the city of New York. 3 reefs there. Going back 12 years I started. And about 3 years ago, 2016, 3.5 years ago, working with the New York City DEP, and Rory did a great video on this, by the way, over years.
Thank you.
Video. Yeah, no, it's dynamite. We created 4. This is the largest project pretty much of New York State. So it's right by JFK Airport, and we picked that because Jamaica Bay has been closed since 1920.
Wow.
Right? 100 years ago, they closed Jamaica Bay because there was a typhoid outbreak. Basically, raw sewage going into the bay like it was going into the Hudson and East Rivers. And you couldn't eat the shellfish there. So we don't want people eating these, even though it's changed amazingly to the positive. It's still not safe to eat the oysters there. So the DEC let us put them by the airport because of the security there. There's cameras, there's guys riding around, there's drones. We have to get permission when we go there to sample our oysters. So it's a really great spot. It's also in about 20, 25 feet of water. So we built these 4 receiver reefs, and they're about 500 square meters each. And they're rectangles, 10 by 50 meters each. And they're kind of close to each other, but not contiguous, not touching each other. And we built 1 donor reef with adult oysters. Again, this is going back 2016, 2017. Working with the New York Harbor School, the Billion Oyster Project, the Hudson River Foundation, I mentioned the New York City DEP, University of New Hampshire, and a consulting firm as well. It was a big project, and it was funded by the federal government and also New York City.
Yeah, sounds great.
Really cool.
A question, Greg, you talk about building a reef. Now, if I have, like, say, 1 oyster larvae and it's swimming around, can that just drop down anywhere and form an adult oyster, or does it need some type of conditions in order to do that?
Yeah, it needs a substrate, a hard substrate. So a lot of Jamaica Bay, for instance, this is really close to a big dredged channel where these large tankers and barges come in with oil for Nassau County primarily, and they're heating oil and gasoline. So it's very muddy. And if an oyster larva went down there, it would pretty much get suffocated and die.
Okay.
Right? Putting shell down, you can improve that sediment, improve that substrate, and you'll get hopefully some settlement on that. And that's one of the things we looked for over the past few years. We did not find any baby oysters on our 4 receiver reefs. That doesn't say they're not there, because you can't look at every square inch of it. They're pretty big. And we had divers, we dove it, and we have harbor school students doing it. But we did find oyster larvae in the water column. So, could
All
be.
right. So
Good.
it sounds like what you're saying is that in the past, when people harvested oysters and ate them, a lot of times they put those shells in people's driveways and did other things with them. Sounds like what you're saying, they should really put them back in the water. Is that true?
Yes, I mean, shells we use for road building, in walls, mixed with lime and
Mm-hmm.
sand, like an early cement or early concrete product. Uh, we have learned over the past, decades to save
Mm-hmm.
that shell, and I'm involved with a fairly small scale shell recycling program where I get from one restaurant. Well, I did get from one restaurant before all this COVID stuff, and we're also getting surf clam shell, which we can get large volumes of. And by the way, the surf clam industry, that's what you get if you buy clam strips, in the freezer section. Howard Johnson's used to sell them. They also use for bait. So
Mm-hmm.
the bait industry, they're freezing this bait and people are going fishing even during this pandemic. So we've been able to get a lot of shell from up in Bayshore on Long Island in western Suffolk County. We put that at the town dump in Southold. Southold town has been very gracious to us, and that's where our marine center is located, where these baby oysters are hatched. And we age it there for pretty much a year. The oyster shells I'm keeping on the site because there's much less of them. And actually, in Jamaica Bay, interestingly, my colleagues came up with the idea to use crushed porcelain. And the porcelain came from New York City Housing Authority and high schools, and schools, I should say, when they replace toilets with low-flow versions. So they crushed these toilets up, put them
Mm-hmm.
on Staten Island for a year, aged them, and we made one of the reefs had a base of crushed porcelain. And yes, oysters will set on them, especially on the non-glazed side.
Right.
Right.
I was
Not
going
the
to ask
shiny,
that.
not the shiny side as much. And
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty cool watching that go overboard in Jamaica Bay from these big barges.
Oh yeah, I was there. That was cool. That was really
Yeah, you got
cool.
the footage. Yeah.
So you mentioned Jamaica Bay. You mentioned Brookhaven. Where else have you made reefs on Long Island?
So one of the largest one besides Jamaica Bay was off the Shinnecock Nation in Southampton
Right.
town in Shinnecock Bay. So it was the west-facing side of the reservation, so you could see the Ponquag Bridge straight off. And there's been a lot of erosion on this reservation over the centuries, decades. And Sandy really did a number on them where there was no beach left. At high tide, the waves would kind of lick at the oak tree roots. It was crazy. It looked like a
Wow.
mangrove forest. So our boss, Chris Pickerel, spearheaded an effort to put sand on there from Shinnecock Inlet, dredged, sent miles through pipes. Large rocks. We did everything from eelgrass and oyster reef, intertidal vascular plants, Spartina. We did upland plants, and even like beach plums, trees up in the
Mm-hmm.
top. And it's really an amazing success story. And I know Rory has some great video of that as well. Maybe 600 feet long. That reef was. It's a linear reef, unlike the other reefs I'm talking about that were more rectangular or square.
It sounds like an oyster reef. There's a lot of food there. Is it possible to eat from there, or is that something that is not possible?
Yeah, that's a common question. And of course, in Jamaica Bay, the answer is no, because it's close to shellfishing. The whole idea of creating these reefs is not to harvest them.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to spawn, filter the water, and pretty much die of old age, which is going to take decades, hopefully. Unless they get a disease, then it could be 5-10 years. So the answer is no. And we try to put these reefs in either closed waters like Jamaica Bay, or in areas that are put aside as sanctuaries and enforced, where even though it's approved waters where you could harvest them and not get sick, say, we still frown on that, and it's enforced by the towns and the state to keep people out.
Well, a lot of times on a reef, they're all hooked together too, aren't they, Greg? So it's hard to separate them.
That's the other thing. It's the same species that people eat in a raw bar, but they can look kind of gnarly, and we grow them on that whole shell. So we may have 10 or 20 oysters on a shell. When you go to an oyster bar, you're getting single oysters that are specifically made that way in a hatchery. So the same techniques in a hatchery, but when we set them, instead of setting them on a little teeny piece of sand or shell that's microscopic, we're setting them on a large 3, 4, 5-inch surf clam shell that's that big. Oh, and speaking of oysters, I brought along some props.
Oh man!
Oh, that's cool.
So this is from the 1930s, probably pre-war. And this company, the Shelter Island Oyster Company, never had a presence on Shelter Island.
Mm-hmm.
but they had grounds, underwater lands, and Island Sound. And during the Second World War, the oyster tins were made out of wax paper. So this is actually
wow.
a wax,
Oh, yeah.
like a cup, like a big Dixie cup. And
Yeah.
this is from Blue Point's company in West Sayville, which it
Huh.
was a real the home of the Blue Point oyster, which is
Mhm.
now getting a resurgence. And you know, if you want to take time to read that, it's a pretty neat thing. So this is probably 19
Cool.
this thing. And also marketing. Everybody's into marketing oysters and coming up with cool names for their oysters. So back in the 1930s and 40s, John Plock, the guy that started the Sheldon Oyster Company, came up with a mascot. So you know Mr. Peanut from
Yeah,
Planters?
right.
He came up with Oscar the Oyster. And if you go on eBay, you could probably find Oscar around. Everything from neckties to address books. And this happens to be a deck of playing cards, still in its original wrapper that I bought on eBay.
Wow.
And with the original tax stamp on it.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
Unwrapped. So I'm not going to be playing Pinochle on my boat today. or actually solitaire.
Solitary. Yeah, right,
I'm
right.
not going to ruin this packaging, but this guy was so ahead of his time with Oscar the Oyster. So think
yeah.
of Mr. Peanut without the monocle.
Yeah, you're right. Good point.
Pretty cool,
Neat.
right? Anyway, I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and thanks everybody out there for supporting each other, and take care of yourselves.
A lot of good information, Gregg, and
Yeah.
we really appreciate you being here and sharing what you know, man. You've been doing this for a while, and you're the go-to guy. I know that for a fact. And I've got people that I know that always refer back to you when anybody wants any kind of information on shellfish or anything like that, how to grow, how to do. So thanks for all you've done at the Marine program.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, a big part of my job is working with commercial shellfish farmers, helping them get permits, solve problems. I work with all 10 towns in Suffolk. All 10 towns do have a shellfish enhancement program, whether it's a hatchery or they buy seed and put them out in the waters for the taxpayers to harvest. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I've been around 30 plus years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Gregg. Really appreciate your time.
You got it.
Okay, so that's our show for today. Join us next week, and we'll be talking about our coastal marine environment and coastal habitat. If you want more information on the Long Island Shellfish Restoration Project, and specifically about the spat-on shell portion, go to ccesuffolk.org/marine, and you'll find the Long Island Shellfish Project link on our main page of the Marine Program website. So stay safe and enjoy our marine environment. Take care.